Hi, and welcome to the Helpware Nerds podcast. I'm Ethan, and, well...
I'm Rob.
Pardon?
I'm Rob. I'm the Rob stand-in, right?
Well, I don't think you are, Rob. You sound a bit too feminine, but I guess you'll do.
Well, I'm not Rob then.
That's better. Okay, so for those of you that keep up with our Facebook, you will have noticed that ever since we went down the Witch's Road, I haven't been able to find Rob. And even poor old Wolverine's missing him at this point. So I gathered a bunch of nerds to help me. And, well, this is the first one. Worst one, if you ask me.
Charming. Yes, I am not Rob, number one. So yeah, to be fair, I do think it's important to point out to listeners, it's not just Rob that's gone missing, it was also the recording of our first take of doing this.
Yes, it was. We did this earlier in the day, and, well, my laptop decided to join the evils that have taken Rob and delete it.
Yeah, definitely feel like we're under a curse here. But yeah, so I guess if we talk about something that you think maybe we should have gone into a bit more detail in, we probably did in the first take. So I guess listeners should probably email in, right?
Yeah,
if they
definitely.
want to know more about what we're talking about.
If you would like to email in, please do that, and you can reach us at asking.nerds@gmail.com.
Fantastic.
Or you could leave a comment on the Facebook page or TikTok or Instagram.
So, like you said, you did the episode on the Witch's Road, and suddenly, Rob's not around. And that's actually really fitting because I actually wanted your help with something anyway to do with Agatha all along. So I guess we should probably start there, right? You called Help for Nerds. So.
Yes, maybe we should live up to the title and actually help.
So the thing I need help with is, since watching Agatha all along, as you'll know, Ethan, we're related, by the way. That's why you said under first one. So we talk about this sort of stuff all the time. So as you'll know, I'm a massive of witches and witchcraft and sort of the history of not just witches, but I guess the supernatural. And while watching Agatha all along, the main thing that's been popping into my head is the Witch's Road a real thing, right? Is it based in something historical? Because I can't find anything from my side. So was it created as a comic?
Yes, it's a comic-specific invention. From my knowledge and recollection and doing some research after we did the first take, this is a Scarlet Witch connection, more than an Agatha Harkness one. She tends to use it, I believe, to reconfigure magic and at one point even return to life.
Oh, okay.
So, comic book wise, Agatha Harkness isn't really the same character we're seeing in the MCU at the moment.
How so?
So, Agatha Harkness is originally introduced as the governess of Franklin Richards of Reed and Sue Richards from the Fantastic Four.
Okay.
She's his nanny. And then she shows back up when Wanda has her children. And then she takes on a mentor role to the Scarlet Witch.
Oh, okay. So it's more of sort of comes in a sort of nurturing role rather than this sort of underhanded sneaky role that she's sort of taken in the MCU.
Yeah, and from what else I've read, they're portraying the relationship between Agatha and Nicholas Scratch as wholesome in a way. Like, he's still a child and everything. Whereas in the comics, Nicholas Scratch hates Agatha Harkness and attacks her at any given turn. And the Salem 7, instead of being the children of the witches that were killed by Agatha, either on accident or by purpose, are the children of Nicholas Scratch.
Okay, so Nicholas Scratch is in Agatha's child.
Yes. So in the comics, the Salem Seven are her grandchildren.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a really interesting spin because obviously not last episode, but the episode before, it was kind of confirmed to us, wasn't it, that Nicholas was dead through the Ouija board. Because I think up until that point, there was kind of I suppose maybe quite a fan theory, or maybe even Agatha thought it herself that Teen might have been Nicholas.
Yeah, it was definitely a theory that was dropping around, and it does feel like they were hinting at the fact that Agatha had an inkling that he was either Billy or Nicholas, and it was the reveal of him being able to say Nicholas Scratch that told her he's not Nicholas Scratch.
Oh, of course. I kind of, in my head, I'd gone, oh, well, if Nicholas is talking through the Ouija board, then that is what triggered this thing in Agatha to be like, oh, it must be Billy. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The whole point of the signal is that he can't say his name. So if he can say the name Nicholas Scratch, he can't be Nicholas.
Yeah. And he says it before Nicholas speaks. So he says, Nicholas Scratch, and then Nicholas goes, Mom, stop.
Right, okay, so it's kind of this dual moment for her. Like, not only is it confirmed that Nicholas is dead, but at the same time it's confirmed to her that Billy isn't exactly who she'd thought he'd been sort of all along.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really interesting in the last episode, actually, that Agatha seemed to hint as if she'd kind of had an inkling he was Billy all along. You know, she talks about this idea of a tell, right? Like, oh, you're so like your mother. And she said she's known for quite a while, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, she had a suspect. She suspected. I don't know what it was. Personally, I've been thinking about it since we did take one. And I know we joked in the first take about it, maybe they crinkled the nose the same way.
Yeah, we were saying, or maybe, there's this whole, like, bewitched thing going on.
But what I also realised is he broke Wanda's spell.
Okay.
Which isn't really supposed to be possible by what Agatha says about the Scarlet Witch. She says that she's impossible, that she can do things witches aren't supposed to be able to do.
Right, so the tell might be that they're doing things that are sort of very much out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
That's really sort of interesting in terms of sort of, I guess, the series kind of plays around with types of magic, right? And so we've kind of got this idea that Wanda and her children, their sort of magic is specialized in sort of breaking sort of the fundamental rules, right? And then you've got Agatha who takes other people's power. And that's
so
also
based on like other pop culture versions, you have the rule breakers through chaos magic and whatever form of magic Billy is wielding. Now, I know in the comics he's the demiurge and more powerful than the Scarlet Witch, but they haven't explained that in the MCU, so we don't know if that's where they're going to go. But I know that Agatha tends to fit the role that shows up in pop culture but doesn't really show in many folk tales, which, traditional witchcraft isn't connected to, but fictional witchcraft is. Of a siphon witch.
Okay, so a witch that takes others' powers.
Yeah, so for those of you in the audience that are Vampire Diary TV show fans, you'll know siphon witches as the witches born in the Gemini coven, like Josie and Elizabeth Saltzman.
I was going to say that's a really important distinction to make. Not that this, we're not going to talk about vampires in this episode, but just as the teenage goth that I was, that was, that living that sort of life as vampire, teen novels became really popular, like Twilight and the Vampire Diaries, the books. I'm very grateful that you made the distinction that the books and the TV show are completely separate entities. because I just couldn't get on board with the TV show because they swapped the characters of Elena and Caroline around. It just really, really annoyed me. Not in terms of their actual roles, but in terms of like their looks and personalities. So yeah, it confused the hell out of me. So thank you for acknowledging that.
No, it's alright. As you pointed out, we are siblings, and I know that annoys you, so I specifically pointed it out so you didn't pull me up.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so it's interesting that you mentioned traditional witches, right? This idea of what I suppose public consensus deems a witch, because obviously historically witches are viewed as getting their power either from nature and things around them. Particularly, I'm thinking in terms of countries like the Scandinavian countries or Iceland. Magic very much comes from the place that they're in, or by casting runes and things like that. Whereas sort of in more westernized cultures, particularly sort of England, its colonies, particularly America, witchcraft seems to have this origin in making deals with the devil, right? And so witchcraft very much comes from something else rather than magic between people.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. I know that a lot of depictions of witchcraft actually come from Freya, Norse mythology, and things like that.
Yeah, and it wasn't really until sort of the 15th century here, sort of in Britain, and that the idea of a witch really becomes sort of tied to religion as well. But the idea of a witch has been around for millennia. It's like the really famous test of can you spot a witch, right? The Dunking test. If you think you're innocent, but if you float, you're guilty. That actually comes from the Code of Hammurabi, like the earliest sort of written evidence for that comes from the Code of Hammurabi, who was a Babylonian king 4,000 years ago. So witches have kind of always been part of the public consciousness.
Yeah, they have. I like the fact that you've gone so far into research, you found out about Babylonian kings.
And isn't that what everybody does on a Saturday night?
Not really.
No, but to be fair, in the show, they reference a lot of things, I think, that are pop culture-y sort of things to do with witches, but also kind of have this kind of historical grounding.
Yeah, they definitely historically ground, but also acknowledge fairy tales. Lilia's friend with the oven is a key example.
Oh, I love that. Like, cast this child-eating witch as the victim in that story. And the fact that they had to go through the oven after the first trial, just to really wham that home,
Through the oven, through the piano, through the attic.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, how the trials are kind of related in some way in the background to historical execution methods, or particularly perceived execution methods for witches. So, even in the potions witch trial, so Jennifer's trial, you have all these references to drowning. Then when we get the fantastic 70s recording studio moment, they're surrounded by fire, and this whole idea that still perpetuates, despite the fact that it's not based in any real sort of truth, that witches were burnt at the stake. And so, you've got this, I suppose, notion of always throughout the series, I think, of these little nods to what people think witches are and what's going off with witches. Like I said, in the public consciousness, which is fascinating. Can I just say, though, I absolutely love the recording studio episode. It really gave me kind of Stevie Nicks, Fleetwood Mac kind of vibe.
I mean, rock and roll has always been tied to the devil, same as witchcraft, which actually has no basis whatsoever.
No, but I thought it was a nice little nod, because obviously in American Horror Story, the coven of witches, one of them is absolutely convinced halfway mostly through the series, American Horror Story Coven. So I think that's season 3. So it's a long time ago now. So I'm not going to issue a spoiler alert because you've had plenty of years to watch it. And Missy is like, Stevie Nicks is a witch. She's a witch. She's a witch. And no one believes her until Stevie Nicks actually appears in the show
As
and
a
goes,
witch.
yeah, I'm 100% a witch. And I just love this idea that, like you said, that rock and roll characters have always been viewed as something sort of supernatural and otherworldly, but in this kind of cool way, right? And it was nice to see everyone playing their instruments. I particularly loved Catherine and her little microphone moment.
I mean, when you look at witches and music, you see, I always go back to 2 things. One, it's not really magic, but it is, like, creepy, Rocky Horror.
Okay.
I know it sounds really weird, but Frankenfurter's first boyfriend, Eddie, is Meatloaf.
Yeah.
So, there's that connection to music there. And then the other one I go to, which is a different extreme, is Harry Potter.
How does Harry Potter relate to rock and roll and witchcraft?
It's not rock and roll, but it is music. So there's a line in one of the Harry Potter books, I believe. I can't remember which one. But it's when they've got, like, everyone singing.
Mm-hmm.
And, sorry, movie fans, it's not Double Double Toil and Trouble. It's the Huggy Huggy Hogwarts song.
In Prisoner of Azkaban.
Yeah, and then George and Fred are singing as well. And after the performance, Dumbledore turns to the choir and says, "Ah, music. One of the greatest magics."
Well, to be fair, I think music has always been classed as magical on its own, right? It's always had a kind of ethereal power.
I mean, yeah, look at Lord of the Rings. Their entire universe is created through music.
I was going to mention that. As you know, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. But also, I'm thinking, and again, you're the one more up on Greek mythology than me. But isn't Hermes also the god of magic, as well as Apollo? Sorry, is also the god of magic, right? As well as the god of music.
So the actual god of magic, or should I say goddess of magic, is Hecate.
Okay. Okay.
But each of the gods, there's a connection to music with, like, virtually all of the gods. So you've got Apollo being the main one that everybody knows, the god of music. Mm-hmm. And then Hermes, like you mentioned, he creates the lyre, I believe it is.
Okay, yeah.
Pan, with the pan flute.
Yeah.
There's the fact that music is so beautiful that Orpheus is able to win Hades over and almost get his girlfriend back just through the power of music.
True. And I suppose Agatha's really playing on this idea of music, right? We've had 2 iterations of the Witch's Rose Ballad so far.
Technically 3.
Technically 3, yeah, and there'll probably be a 4th before we're done.
Because I'm not sure if anybody else caught into this, but we did have the one that was sang in the 2nd episode, the one that was sang by the Protection, mm-hmm. and the opening of the 1st episode is the Witch's Road Ballad.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the True Detective inspired episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which actually, brings me, I suppose, nicely to this week's episode. I really appreciated seeing the interrogation scene, but through the eyes of Billy.
It was so funny. Just watching Catherine Hahn, you could tell she was trying not to piss herself laughing.
And I suppose, have we even referenced yet, actually, so far for, make sure you're up to date. Teen is Billy Maximoff, if we've not already said that.
Massive spoiler alert for this entire podcast.
Yeah, I've just realised we've been calling him Billy this entire time and haven't sort of acknowledged that. We're kind of assuming if you're watching an episode on Agatha all along, you're probably up to date with it.
Yeah, I mean, Massive spoiler for something that Funko Pop spoiled before the show even came out.
True. But yeah, no, that scene was brilliant when he's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's just pointing at random bits of flowers.
They're not just flowers, they're Dottie's flowers.
Yeah.
Because there was a fan theory, I don't know if you will know this, but there was a theory back in WandaVision days that said there were 3 witches in Westview.
Yes, and the flowers represented the magic, right?
Yeah, so you had Wanda with the scarlet flowers, roses.
Yep.
Then you had Agatha with purple flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had Dottie with the yellow flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was convinced that the fact that we saw them and they were each individually coloured, that Dottie was going to be another witch.
Right, okay. That's really interesting.
I find it absolutely hilarious that was a massive theory. And then Agatha just turned around at the beginning of this show and was like, "Oh, whenever a witch lives somewhere, you'll always find another witch very, very close."
Yeah.
And so I'm like, is Dottie a witch? Was that a wink, wink, nudge, nudge?
Mm-hmm. But instead, she decided to pick on her neighbour, Mrs. Hart, who isn't Mrs. Hart, she's Mrs. Davis.
No, she's not. She's Kitty Foreman.
No, yeah, I was going to say R.I.P. Kitty Foreman. I can't ever watch Deborah Jo Rudd in anything without seeing her as Kitty Foreman now.
No.
Amazing.
To be fair, it's like when you see, like for me, whenever I see Julian who played Cole Turner in Charmed.
Right, yeah.
He's played Doctor Doom in the Fantastic Four. He's played an FBI agent in FBI Most Wanted.
It'll always be Cole.
But every time he turns up on screen, I'm like, "Hi, Cole. Where's Phoebe?"
Yeah, I feel the same way when we're watching Patti LuPone in this series. I'm like, she isn't anything but Patti LuPone. You know, she's too much of an icon. I know she's called Lilia, but at the same time, I'm just like, it's Patti.
I mean, I always felt the same for, God rest her soul, Maggie Smith.
Don't get me started, I'll cry again.
You know, every time she turned up in something, it was, "Oh, hi, Maggie." No, "Oh, it's McGonagall." Or, "It's the Dowager."
I was going to say, you know, I won't be able to watch Downton Abbey 2 for a very long time now because of, you know, the scene with the Dowager at the end. It will make me an absolute emotional wreck. Anyway, back to Agatha. Actually, it's interesting you've mentioned Charmed, because, you know, this is something we've talked about in the past, but we've talked about the idea of broomsticks, right, and witches.
Yeah, so they use it in a specific way, and you only in this time travel episode, which could only take place on All Hallows Eve, where they see that brooms used to be used to sweep away evil.
Yeah, so you have to go a particular way, right?
Yeah, left to right.
Whereas what right to left will bring the evil in, I'm assuming?
I believe the idea is that if you sweep right to left, you're inviting evil in, whereas if you sweep left to right, you are pushing it away.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so yeah, in that sort of sense, the broom isn't in that Charmed episode is more of a sort of protection implement, yeah, than an object of flying.
Yeah, I mean, they twist it at the end that the witch that can levitate sits on a broom and it levitates with her, but it's not really got any connection to witchcraft itself. It's just that one witch decides it would be funny.
Yeah, whereas I suppose in Agatha, we saw them literally pick up sticks from the side of the road and do a ritual which enabled them to sort of fly, which I thought was a fantastic, like, little nod to sort of the history of the broomstick.
I liked it because there was a nod to something else as well.
Okay, so you go first, and then I've got a question to ask you.
So, in the scene, they choose Alice to hand the broom to Billy.
Mm-hmm.
And in the comics, Alice's character is considered as Wanda's best friend. for a time.
Oh, okay.
So it's almost as though they substituted Billy for Wanda.
Oh, that's a nice little nod then, isn't it?
I think that's why their friendship works pretty well.
Mm. So my question to you is, do you actually know anything about the history of broomstick?
I do not.
Oh, well, lucky for you. I do. So, broomsticks, or at least the sort of depiction of sort of witches flying on a broomstick, actually comes from the 15th century. So the late Middle Ages, if you work in epochs rather than centuries. And it comes from this idea that the devil was licensed by God to kind of have this vehicle to test humans, right? That he could give them a slice of power and this idea of magic to get what they wanted, but in return they had to worship him. And so, I suppose that make getting into heaven a sort of who gets in easier for God and Saint Peter to judge, because of course everyone that will be tempted by the devil, they're just not on the list going forward. And supposedly, the devil was granted permission to do this by God, because of course God is almighty, and therefore there had to be this belief that God had sanctioned this. But of course, hell is wherever it is. Obviously people tend to point down, but it's not always depicted that way. Either way, it's a very long place, a long road, to get there. And you've got these coven of witches. So you've got mass people trying to travel, right, in order to get to the devil to worship.
Yeah.
And so the idea came about that there was this special ointment that witches would be able to smear on any sort of furniture, and then they could ride it to fly to the devil for their worship.
Any sort of furniture. So what
yeah.
you're telling me is bedknobs and broomsticks took the idea from actual witch lore.
They could have done. It is entirely possible. I think we've been robbed by the image, I suppose, of a middle-aged woman riding a dresser, across a moonlit sky. But the fact is, the broomstick's the one that stuck around because it was the one that most people would have definitely had in their homes.
That explains why in Hocus Pocus you have them riding on mops and behoovers.
The Hoover. Yeah, the Hoover is my favourite.
And my favourite one is in the new one, Hocus Pocus 2, where she stood on a rumba.
Oh my god, fantastic. Yeah, because these are just, you could enchant the special household objects, and it was this idea of you pick up what's around, right? And so for people, it might not have even been a broomstick, it could have even been a stick, because, furniture in the medieval period the Middle Ages, isn't the same as we have it now. Houses were very sparsely furnished. And so it could be the idea that they've picked up a stick from the side of the road and used it as a flying instrument actually ties really nicely into that sort of old myth behind witches.
Yeah. That depiction's pretty cool. I mean, this is slightly off topic, but it's because of something you mentioned while you were talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
When you said hell and people tend to point down. Did you know the depiction we have of hell isn't even mentioned in the Bible? It's only mentioned in Dante's Inferno.
I did know that, but that is mainly because I'm a fan of Dante Alighieri, with my whole Renaissance literature background. I've seen Dante's Death Mask, just as a side note, when we were in Florence. I took myself off to go actually see the Death Mask in the Medici Palace, and I have a picture of me stood next to Dante's tomb, which is in the church next to it.
I just like the fact that guy wrote a book about hell, and it is supposed to just be a story.
Yeah,
and yet it got co-opted into being the depiction of hell.
The depiction of hell, yeah. It's kind of interesting, isn't it, how through time, sort of, the devil and agents of the devil and depictions of hell kind of change to kind of fit the beliefs of the time and also the political agenda of the time.
I mean, a completely different religion, but Helheim from Norse mythology is depicted as cold.
Yeah,
and
absolutely,
like
completely
ice,
opposite.
and
Yeah.
ruled by a woman.
Okay, so yeah, they got this idea of. So is that connected to like the Hela character in the four?
Yeah, so Hela is not the daughter of Odin, she's the daughter of Loki.
Oh,
And a giantess, I believe her name is Angraboda. And
right, yeah.
they have 3 children. They have Fenrir, or Fenris Wolf, Jormungandr, the Midgard
The same.
serpent,
Yeah.
and Hela. And Helheim is named after Hela.
Okay, so Hela's home. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and she's actually pretty reasonable.
Oh, okay. That's quite funny.
Well, I mean,
Well,
Hades is pretty reasonable as well, but he's always depicted as the bad guy. I'm looking at you, Disney's Hercules.
As in, did Hades a major disservice? You know, this is why we like Percy Jackson
Yes.
and its depiction. But it's interesting that you mentioned that in Norse mythology, the sort of satanic figure is a woman, because obviously going back to that idea of me saying that magic and magic users change between places, you know, we have this idea that the witch must equal woman, but actually sort of in Iceland and the Scandinavian countries, witches would have been predominantly male because of how they have to cast magic. You know, the woman in Western cultures, again, back to this idea of Britain, Germany, America, and then sort of, I guess, Western Europe has always been seen as innately female, magic as a thing. I'm thinking like the Pythia, for example, in Greek mythology. There's this idea that women sort of have magic within them, whereas men, you know, that they cast magic using other things like the rings. And actually, I love the fact of how Agatha all along is looking at sort of gender and sexuality in its show, because, you know, they kind of, obviously they're wanting to introduce the character of Wiccan.
Who is
But,
canonically a gay man.
exactly. But the idea as well that even before he was sort of revealed as that, this idea that a coven wouldn't be made up of entirely women is actually true to, you know, historical record. Men were persecuted and executed too. In fact, one of the first people to die in the Salem witch trials, and obviously Agatha is classed as a Salem witch, was John Proctor, and his wife, I think she was called Elizabeth Proctor. You know, they both died by hanging, and they're one of the first round of victims of the Salem witch trial. Actually, one of the last victims of the Salem witch trials is also an old man. I think he's in his 70s, and he dies by being pressed to death. And that which sort of changes public consensus over sort of this mass hysteria that's led to all these deaths in Salem witch trials. It's sort of that sort of turns people sour on this idea of executing all the witches. So I really like the idea that they're depicting men as magic users. But like you said, you know, Billy is canonically gay in the comics, and we get this idea, I think, between Agatha and Rio, that there's been a past there.
Yeah, I mean, the fan theory / sort of confirmed by Funko Pop again is that she's playing Mistress Death, who is an entity of their own fruition. So there is a fan theory that popped up around the time this got exposed that maybe because Death can be anything, she's also the biological parent of Nicholas Scratch.
Oh, that would be really interesting, I think. Which would also kind of add an extra layer, right, to her comment on how, you know, I had to do my job. I didn't want to do it, but I had to do it.
Yeah. So, like, it wasn't just that Nicholas was Agatha's son and that death came for him anyway. It's the fact that he was their son and she came for him anyway.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's ridiculously sad, but in a way I think it would add a lot more nuance to the characters.
It would explain why Rio is so angry at Agatha and why Agatha is so angry at Rio. Because it would be like,
Well,
you don't understand my side. Well, you're not looking at mine either.
absolutely. It does actually raise question though, because I've been wondering since it started, like, what is the whole story with Nicholas? Like, we now know that he's definitely passed away, but how did that come to be? I'm hoping we get answers to that by the end of the show. Have you got any spoiler alerts, I guess, from the comic? Not that obviously the show is following religiously the comics, they never do.
So,
But
like I said,
any
in the
theories?
comics, Nicholas Scratch is more of an antagonist to Agatha Harkness and isn't dead. However, I feel like they've alluded to some things in the show already.
Okay.
So when Agatha had her poison hallucination, she hears a baby crying, and then goes to the bassinet, only to reveal the Darkhold.
Right, okay, yes. I did clock that, and I was wondering what that might mean.
So, and then we have that little drop, that little moment between, you said a name earlier and I forgot it already, Potions Witch and Billy.
Jennifer,
that's it. I should remember that. Jennifer Love Hewitt is one of my favourite actresses.
Yeah.
But Jennifer and Billy have that conversation where they say that they believe that Agatha traded her son for the Darkhold.
Oh, right, yeah. So do you reckon that's what the story, we're going to have that revealed to her, that that's what happened?
I think that is exactly what happened. However, like we said about the witches attacking her and her having no control, I think they're going to play Agatha as more of a neutral character, where yes, she wanted power, she wanted the Darkhold, but she didn't know what the price was.
Right, yeah, because I think, she's been portrayed as this villain, particularly sort of in WandaVision, My Name Attractions, at the end of, with Scarlet Witch, right? The idea that she murdered her entire coven, but it's become clear that she can't control that magic.
Yeah, and for those of you that are going to point out the other scene where she sort of grabbed on, I don't think she grabbed on. I think she realized she had an audience. So she played into the persona that they all had of her already.
Yes, I like it when we get glimpses of, I guess, the real Agatha, because it's really interesting that throughout WandaVision we see her playing characters, right? The character of the nosy neighbor in different types of sitcom. Then in this, it started with her playing the detective. And I think even when all that has been put to one side, she's still playing a character and a role. She believes people are wanting her to play,
the
right?
witch killer. She's playing Agatha Harkness, the coven killer, the bitch witch of history.
Yeah, like if you want me to be a villain, I'll be a villain.
Yeah, I know it brings me to that line from Mother Gothel from Tangled. I know she actually was the villain, but it does bring me to that line where she's like, you want me to be the bad guy? Fine, I'll be the bad guy.
Yeah, that very much seems what Agatha's doing, right? And I really hope that by the end of the series we see that crack a little and we see the real Agatha Harkness.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good thing to happen. I think it needs to happen, in my opinion. I think Agatha Harkness is a really good character and more of a neutral character in the comics. I don't want her to be a villain. I want her to be a Wanda Maximoff. So Wanda is not a hero. I'm sorry to everyone that loves Scarlet Witch in the MCU. I get it. I'm a massive Elizabeth Olsen fan. I think she plays the role fantastic. She's not a hero. Not anymore.
No, as in, oh my God, and all you have to do is look at Sharon Davis's reaction when, her hallucinations started before everybody else's, and we saw her real perspective on her husband's death, not the sitcom-y ha 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 laughing that we saw in WandaVision, but actually what was going through her mind and her emotions. And you're not telling me that the person that did that to her isn't a villain? Come on.
The bad takes that I see online in regards to Scarlet Witch are that they all could feel her grief and pain, so how can they still hate her? And it's like, she tortured them unintentionally. I'm not saying that it was all intentional, but she tortured them for we don't know how long.
Mm-hmm. And it's clear it's caused a lot of trauma from how the neighbours reacted, right?
There's a specific scene that I always go back to where I think it is Dottie, where she breaks out of her character, like the Agatha, and then she's like, hey, cast my son. Maybe he can be a friend to your kids. Just let me see my son. Just let me see him.
Mm-hmm.
Which implies that, yeah, they're eating, because she's not outright killing anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But these parents aren't seeing their children.
No. Which I guess is another kind of pain. You know, she's lost someone, so she wants other people to lose people too.
Yeah. And when it comes to Mrs. Davis,
Davis
as husband, the whole, Vision phases the choking thing out of his body, but she left that way too long. And then we find out in this season that he's dead.
Mm.
So...
yeah, because he doesn't become a standing character. Mrs. Davis does throughout WandaVision, becomes a recurring character, but her husband isn't as prominent. And so, you get this idea, don't you, that he's died sort of in the background, off screen.
Yeah,
so to
and
speak.
it's probably connected to that event. So while Wanda didn't set out to kill Mr. Davis, her actions led to the death of Mr. Davis.
And I suppose you could say the exact same for Agatha Harkness.
Yeah, she didn't set out to be this murderous bad bitch witch, but she's over hundreds of years old, so that's who she is now.
When you say bitch witch, by the way, my mind's immediately going to her mother as that accurate description. Oh my god, what a vile woman!
Oh, that was homophobia. No one is going to convince me otherwise.
Exactly.
That line.
That
line.
Unnatural, right?
Unnatural, born evil.
Playing into sort of outdated stereotypes.
Yeah, it was pure and simple homophobia. And what brought that home for me was, even though she hates her guts, Rio was like, you're not having her. Get away from her.
Yeah.
Like, she can't stand Agatha. And, I've not been in any other relationships besides my current partner. But if we split up and her parents were awful, even if it ended awful, I wouldn't want her anywhere, still want her anywhere near her parents if they were like that.
They were like that, yeah, because you still have this kind of innate respect and care for people.
Yeah, even if it unless it ended completely bad, I don't know, she killed someone.
Katie has not killed anyone, so disclaimer on the podcast.
Yeah, disclaimer, my partner hasn't killed anyone, and I actually like her parents, so not that thing, but in a hypothetical world,
yeah,
had she done that, that would be the only cut-off point. But again, these people are immortal, so
yeah.
I do like the fact that they've done that as well. How do you differentiate between sorcerers like Wong and Doctor Strange and witches like the Scarlet Witch? Well, one, they're born with their powers. They don't learn it. And two, they're immortal.
Yeah.
Not in the sense that they can't be killed, but in the sense that they don't age.
Yeah, they don't die of natural causes.
Yeah. Because it's obviously Agatha is a Salem witch. It's implied that Lilia has been around since the French Revolution.
Yes.
So
I will say her hallucination scene was very creepy.
Yeah, I know in the comics that she was sort of disowned and abused by her family because she could see the future.
Oh.
I believe that obviously we saw Jen's backstory of the fact that she was literally drowned.
Mm-hmm.
And then that entire curse with Alice and her family, that even though they're supposed to be immortal, semi-immortal witches, they all die in horrendous fires.
Yes.
So...
Yeah. It's just this idea that just because you're immortal as well, that it doesn't mean you go by unscathed.
Yeah, it's like elves in Lord of the Rings, I suppose. Like, they don't die of old age. They can't die of old age.
Yeah.
Unless they choose to. Looking at you, Arwen. But, you know, they also can die. They can be killed.
In one sense, yes, but in Lord of the Rings, they go to the...
They go to Valinor.
The island in between, isn't it, before you get there?
Oh, the halls of...
The Dying or something.
The
and it's where you
Undying
can,
Lands.
Yeah, and it's where you can rest, purify your soul, ready to go to Valinor, right?
Yeah,
and then if they want to, they can come back.
And then the humans, they go to the halls of Hodor. Not Hodor, that's Game of Thrones. But it begins with a H anyway.
Yeah, because that's where the ring bearers end up. They don't go to Valinor itself. They go to sort of the island just before. The idea that they can heal from the trauma that the ring gave them.
That it placed upon them, yeah. But back to the point I was making.
Back to witches. We could, if people want it, you could do a whole episode, I guess, on Lord of the Rings.
Yes, I definitely could.
Happy to come back. but anyway, back to Agatha.
Back to my point that I was making. It's this natural connection that the elves in Lord of the Rings and witches in the MCU and culture in general have with the earth that sustains them. Not a natural thing that any other individual has.
Do you know, that makes complete sense, because obviously when Rio comes, if she is Mistress Death, she says, when someone says, "Oh, are you an Earth Witch?" she says, "No, I'm the witch."
Yeah, it's the most badass line in the entire show. No one's going to convince me otherwise. Which is like, are you a Green Witch? The Green Witch.
Yeah, this idea, right, that death and the earth or life on the other side is kind of always entwined with each other.
What comes from the earth returns to the earth.
Exactly. So I guess, where do you think the series is going to go? I guess that's the next logical question, right?
I think at the end of the road, there's going to be a figure. And I think it's going to tie into the fact that I believe the road is somewhat based on the yellow brick road from The Wizard of Oz.
Okay, yeah.
Especially seeing as though they are alluded to the fact that they are doing a Wizard of Oz themed episode.
They're doing a Wizard of Oz themed episode.
According to the mid-season trailer, there's a Wizard of Oz clip.
Okay.
So I think they are doing a Wizard of Oz themed episode. And for me, I would like to see that as like the penultimate episode before we get to the end of the road.
Okay, yeah.
Because
so we next week
to the end of the yellow brick road, and who's waiting at the end of the road but
wizards.
Oz the Great and Powerful. But what if Oz the Great and Powerful is someone that's already been name dropped in this season?
Who is?
Mephisto.
So, for non-comic book readers who are just casually watching the show, obviously I know who Mephisto is because we've had this conversation in the past, but can you explain for everyone who Mephisto is in terms of the comic book?
So Mephisto is one of the Hell Lords. He's not Satan. Satan is his own character, but he is Satan-esque. So you'll see him with red skin, making deals with mortal, having a connection to Spider-Man and Wanda, and even Hulk at some points. And while some people do think he is the same person that makes the deal with Johnny Blaze in Ghost Rider. Sorry, I had to think then. I was going to call him Ghostface.
Wrong franchise.
Yeah. It's not. That is Satan. Whereas Mephisto isn't actually Satan. So that's what I'm saying. They have their own things.
And he's connected to magic, right? Not just this idea of being demonic. There's magic
and
as well.
He's more connected to Billy and Tommy. I mean, he's connected to magic because all mythical creatures are connected to magic. You've got the Ashanti from Doctor Strange. You've got the magic users of the Asgard.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, the Greek magicians.
Mm-hmm.
There's even, voodoo exists in the Marvel Universe with Brother Voodoo.
Okay.
And things like that. And even Merlin and Morgana are real in the Marvel Universe.
Very cool. So if Mephisto isn't connected to magic, the reason why I automatically made that assumption is because you said he'd be at the end of the Witcher's road.
The reason why I think he's going to be at the end of the road is because of his connection to Billy and Tommy in the comics.
Which is?
So his soul is what actually makes up their souls. Wanda unintentionally Horcruxed Mephisto and split his soul and created her children out of it.
So she does that without thinking?
Yeah. Like how she does most things. In the comics, she utters the words, "No more mutants," because she's annoyed, and it wipes out virtually the entire mutant population, except for 147.
Okay, so moral of the story, don't piss off the Scarlet Witch then, I guess. But yeah, so she rips Mephisto's soul and this becomes her children.
Until he takes his soul back, but magic can't be undone, so the kids are reincarnated with their own individual souls.
Right, okay, and is this where in the comic books the idea of Billy Kaplan comes in?
Yeah, so you get Billy Kaplan, who is the reincarnation of Billy Maximoff, and then you have Tommy Shepard, who is the reincarnation of Tommy Maximoff.
Okay, and do they have the same powers?
So Billy retains his magical abilities, although it originally manifests as lightning-based abilities, and his original code name in the comics is the Asgardian, because he has powers similar to that of Thor.
Okay.
And then he figures out that he's actually magic and who his mum is, so he changes his name to Wiccan. Tommy, on the other hand, takes after his uncle and is a speedster.
Right, okay.
So, what you got to think is Wanda manifested these children from her thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're twins as well, because that's what she sees siblings as, because that's what she is.
That's what she is, yeah, okay.
She also manifested the same sort of abilities in her children, with son being magic and her other son being fast.
Right, okay, yeah, I get that. So she's kind of created the same dynamic because she's, in her mind, that's what she's sort of wanting back.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, not perfect, but, very sad. But I get what you mean.
Yeah, she's trying to recreate what she lost in the MCU. Quicksilver's not dead in the comics.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, it's
okay. My
okay.
lack of comic book knowledge. So, if you think Mephisto's going to be at the end of the road, then does that mean that Billy might be in danger?
I think Billy, being what Billy is, kind of escaped being reclaimed.
Right.
Or maybe forced himself to reincarnate. And the only way to get back Tommy is to bargain with a devil.
Right, okay. But I guess much more, it wants a lot more back and forth than Doctor Strange when he's like, Dormammu, I come to bargain.
Yes, so I mentioned that he has a connection to Spider-Man.
Uh-huh.
The connection to Spider-Man comes because Aunt May dies.
Uh-huh.
And Spider-Man makes a deal with Mephisto to give up his marriage to Mary Jane so that it never existed in exchange for Aunt May's life.
Oh, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, nobody likes that. Especially when you look at the point in the comics, she's about 90 years old.
Oh, poor Aunt May.
So,
But at the same time, let MJ live.
well, MJ doesn't exactly die, it's just their marriage never happened.
Well, let Peter and MJ stay married then.
Well, Marvel have this weird thing about Spider-Man never allowed to be happy, so...
I think they have that thing about a lot of people, right? All these superheroes seem to always be kind of met with some form of sorrow, and they'll kind of get their happy ending. Unless you're MCU Captain America.
I mean, there's a few characters that it doesn't apply to, so unless your name is Sue and Reed Richards, or Lois and Clark Kent, you don't get to stay married.
Although, to be fair, we can't blame Marvel for Superman.
We can't blame Marvel for Superman, no, but DC are just as bad at breaking up marriages. I'm looking at Batman and Catwoman.
But basically then, do you reckon Agatha will fall into the sort of category of one of those that might get a slightly happy ending, or do we reckon...
I think what's going to happen, and it's a theory I saw on an Agatha All Along page on Facebook, so I don't want to take the credit.
Okay.
But I think Agatha is going to be given a choice between restoring her power, which is what she said she wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and undoing everything that happened upon the road.
Okay, and sort of bringing everyone kind of back to life and...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Oh,
So
that'll be a nice little redemption arc for her. It starts off with her accidentally murdering her coven, and it ends with her giving up something she wants in order to restore her coven.
And by restoring her coven and proving to Billy she can change, it's going to be Billy that restores Agatha's power. Because he can break the laws of magic.
Oh, I think that'd be a fantastic ending. Very, very Disney, but of course that's it's streaming on Disney, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a very Disney ending, but I really do like the idea of Agatha choosing the good path, but still getting what she wants in the end. Mm-hmm. It feels very Agatha to be like, well, I did the right thing, and then getting what she wants anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of excited, I guess, to see as well where the character of Wiccan goes in the series and what happens sort of beyond this. I'm loving the fact that we've got like this sort of campy, really sort of interesting TV show that's running up to the holiday of Halloween, and that I think you mentioned earlier that there will be 2 episodes, right, on Halloween night.
That's what I've heard. Don't take me at my word, you or the audience. It is what I've heard, that it's going to be a double feature on Halloween, which sadly for Americans, because you get it on Wednesdays and not Thursdays like the UK, it won't actually be on Halloween for you.
Well, maybe they can wait, because I think my Halloween plan's sorted now. I think I'll be watching Agatha sort of in the evening, followed by Practical Magic, just in time for the midnight margaritas. So yeah.
Well, for me, I'll be watching Halloween Town, all of them, followed by Agatha.
All of them. Classic Disney, cozy Halloween film.
Yep. Halloween Town, followed by Twitches, followed by Agatha.
What is Twitches?
Twin Witches. It's a Disney movie. They were twins that came from this magical kingdom, and they were separated at birth because their uncle tried to usurp power. Not that they know that. Then they meet up in the real world and find out they're magical, and whenever they use their powers together, they're really strong. So they're not just witches, they're twitches.
That's so unbelievably cheesy. Okay, yeah. I guess maybe people write in. Have you heard of Twitches? And 2, is that the movie you would choose to watch on Halloween night. I
Look,
can think of many others that are so much better.
look, I like camp, and my girlfriend hates horror movies. So
Adam's Family, Witch of the Beastly.
well, we'll probably stick on Adam's Family. Or I might just FaceTime Dad, aka Lurch.
That's very mean. But either way, we'll both be watching the finale of Agatha all along. And, if you've enjoyed this episode, we're hoping that you'll be watching too. So, yeah, I guess I'm kind of interested to know what other people's fan theories of the ending to Agatha will be.
And can I just ask one last thing before we go off?
Go on then.
Did you get chills when the crown appeared on his head and Billie Eilish played?
I wouldn't quite say chill, but I thought it was good.
When the crown showed up and he looked super evil, and then You Should See Me in My Crown started playing, I was like, okay, 1, cheesy song choice because he's just got a crown.
Mm-hmm.
2, okay, this dude is badass.
Simultaneously, you're very cheesy, but I like it.
Yes, it kind of gave me like cheesy chills.
Cheesy chills. I guess that's where we'll end it.
Well, thank you for tuning in to this unique episode of the Help We're Nerds podcast. And I've been Ethan.
And I've been not Rob.
Signing off.
Bye.
Help.